Today. We've got Lacy Durham and Angela Zambrano. So Lacy is a manager over at Deloitte Tax and focuses on employee benefits, executive compensation, tax. She does all sorts of qualified plans, health and welfare arrangements, fringe benefits. Oh, yay, we have an Angela. Very good. She does anything related to benefits. Lacy does that. She's super involved in bar work. If you don't know Lacy, I'm surprised you haven't met her yet, because she's done ABA, she's done state bar, she's done local bar, she's done a whole lot of bar stuff. Big volunteer, has received many, many awards. A member of Leadership Dallas as well. If you haven't met Lacy, please do go and meet her in a non-COVID world. And we also have Angela Zambrano. So Angela is a co-leader of her firm, Sidley's Commercial Litigation Disputes Practice, and a member of the COVID-19 Task Force. She represents companies and boards of directors in commercial litigation and internal investigations, including big litigation like class actions and multi-jurisdictional disputes. She is a former president of Dallas Women Lawyers Association, and she received last year Outstanding Female Lawyer Award. She also has a lot of awards as well, just like Lacy, though I do want to mention that last week, she and her partner were named the American Lawyers Litigators of the Week after an arbitrator agreed with her client's position that their client didn't owe any money. So that's super exciting for Angela. So with that, I'm going to turn to the substance of her presentation. We do have a chat box, so if anyone has any questions, I will be watching that. Just throughout, we welcome any questions, and I'll incorporate them in the presentation. So we're gonna talk a little bit about, so how do we demonstrate value in today's world? Because we don't want to just survive in COVID world. We want to thrive in COVID world. I'm gonna start with Angela first. So how do we demonstrate our value to those that we work with?
Can you guys hear me? Great. Okay. Hi, I'm Angela Zambrano. Thank you for that very nice introduction, Dena, and apologies for my tech issues. Ironically, I drove to the office so that my tech would be better. So I should have stayed in my home office, which is in my closet. I get great signal there. But anyway, I hope you all are doing well and surviving in COVID world. That is, yes, just a classic example of the problems that we deal with on a regular basis. Why don't you just throw remote school in and some other things, and we'll, that's about your average week. In terms of, thriving in a COVID environment, I've been thinking about this a lot, and how people have been really valuable to me in terms of, as being a supervisor and the dealing with a variety of people all the time in my job, who's really shining right now in my world. So who's really impressing me, and what is it specifically that they're doing? I think right now it's really important to be visible. And I don't mean you have to do Zoom calls all the time to be visible. I mean, just checking in and making sure that people, know that you're doing stuff. And in a normal world, a non-COVID world, this actually really annoys me, because I feel like we're all professionals and we don't have jobs that, I need somebody to send me an email every day with what they're doing. We certainly don't need that right now, but I do think the people that are really the superstars right now are making sure that their activities are noted. And these are big and small, right? But just that you're helping, move the line. You're doing it every day. I also think that right now, personally, from the law firm perspective, and Lacy and I are going to try to separate this when we can from a corporate perspective or for a law firm perspective. From a law firm perspective, the non-billable stuff is kind of even harder to do right now, because, we're at home, and it's sometimes it feels like 24/7, there's no separation. And then when you're talking about not working on a client matter, but something else that the firm really does need you to do, it's even just motivationally a little bit harder. And so I think the people that are pitching in and raising their hands to do that right now you're really buying a lot of loyalty with people in the future, in terms of, people having long memories and remembering that you were the kind of person that rode the oars when no one was looking.
So I know when
I don't know if that answered your question.
yeah, it does. And well, I'm going to turn to Lacy, but I also want to talk a little bit about how do you, without coming off as perhaps, I don't know, bragging, I guess. Like, I mean, I do know that that's a criticism of women professionals sometimes, that we don't toot our horn enough. But how can you get across all the wonderful things that you're doing that, for instance, you, Angela,
Dena,
might not know?
Dena, if that was addressed to me, I couldn't hear that. I'm sorry. There was an audio issue.
Okay. What's the best way to tell you all the great things that your people are doing for you? Okay, she looks like she's blocked. All right, Lacy.
Well, I'll see
Technical
if I can,
difficulties.
sure, I'll see if I can answer both parts of that. So I'll start with demonstrating value. I think Angela was spot on in terms of, being visible, but I think we have to realize that in-house legal teams have traditionally been more likely than not very lean to begin with, and resources have been scant. So, you throw in a pandemic and it's really par for the course, right? And so you often see a larger range of generalists on board on the in-house side. And so one of the things to demonstrate value that you have to do is you really have to acknowledge that currently the legal profession is being pushed outside of its comfort zone and really forced to change the way that we do business and we demonstrate value. And unfortunately, there's no real signs of this slowing right now or going back to the way that it was before. And so from an in-house perspective, knowing that you are a cost center, in most cases, you really have to pursue growth opportunities that really require a lot of confidence for you to see your own potential. And so that's going to mean, maybe even evaluating your budget. You're going to have to demonstrate value by making sure that your organization is getting, the most that it can. You may even want to demonstrate some value by pivoting your practice. There are a lot of new and novel issues right now that, let me tell you, nobody is prepared for. And there's usually, a reach to go to outside counsel for some things, but this is a great opportunity for you to expand your generalist knowledge and really pivot to another particular area that's going to impact the organization. You think about things like cyber security and cyber safety, procurement, kind of given the current situation. And so you want to make sure that you are demonstrating that value by going beyond the norm. And so some of the questions to maybe, help you evaluate this is, what tools or what can I do to reskill my teams, or what can I do to reskill or retool myself? Are there additional platforms that I should be familiar with in order to work smarter and not necessarily harder? How can that reduce costs? How can I change my delivery model internally to my clients in the organization so that it is more apt for them to be able to follow? Are there any other internal legal services that I can streamline to remove any additional layers to appear or to create more efficiency? So I think from the in-house perspective, there's quite a few things that you can do, but it does require a different mindset in order to be able to move forward and demonstrate that value. Everybody's looking for additional cost savings now. So to the extent that you can manage your outside counsel budget, you can manage your internal budget better and really provide more to your clients. I think that's how you demonstrate value.
So I do see a lot of those who are attending. There are a lot that have niche practice areas. For instance, insurance would be a niche practice area. And frankly, in COVID world, there was a time there, and anyone who's dealing with any employment law issues knows this. I mean, the laws were coming fast and furiously. I mean, we had the federal, the state, the local, and sometimes they conflicted, and you had to figure out which jurisdiction are you in, and are you in Collin County or Dallas County, and what is Dallas County saying versus Collin County, and what about Mass? Where do you live versus where you work, and are you allowed? Are you essential? That type of thing. And so it was a real opportunity to step in and frankly read more law than I'd read since law school, to be honest. I'm really up on COVID, particularly for governmental entities. Lacy, I think that was very helpful. One thing I know, I talked to you both, you had different words about this. So Angela, you're still connecting, but Lacy, you called it a brag book, and Angela, you had called it a value list. Talk about the importance of that, particularly in COVID world.
Definitely. A brag book is a list, the detailed laundry list of really everything that you've done to add value to your organization. And even I always include my personal development too, because my personal development has a tendency to eke out into my professional life, and the company gets the benefit of it. And so I literally make a habit of keeping a running list on my computer that's backed up of all of the good things that I'm doing. How am I demonstrating value? You know, the business unit that I saved an extra, $50K for, or the business unit where I help demonstrate to the employees how to navigate through COVID. Anything that you're doing that is adding value, you need to make sure that you're keeping good note of that. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to leverage that going forward. And one of the things that women have traditionally not done well is toot their own horn. And so instead of in the moment trying to think of, gosh, what are all these things that I've done? It's so much easier to kind of have that running laundry list of how I've saved the company money, how I've, resolved an issue, how I was able to propel other team members forward. What have I done in my extra time that made the organization look good? It's never just Lacy Durham. It's always Lacy Durham, my employer. And so there's some goodwill, some value to that. And, I always encourage people to have that ready. It's nothing worse than preparing for your evaluations at year-end or quarter or whenever you have them, and you're racking your brain trying to figure out, what have you done that was amazing? It's just better to have that as a running list. I even take it a step further. For some of my key clients, I reach out to them and say, hey, can you give me some feedback on what I've done? It doesn't have to be a paragraph. It can be 2 or 3 sentences. And listen, those that are great, that are over the wall, I absolutely take that email, save it, and include it in that document. That's a much different conversation when I'm having with my supervisor or whoever I'm reporting up to. When a client has said, listen, you saved us so much money. You took an impossible task and you made it seem easy. You helped me understand something differently. So it's a must that you have a brag book.
Well, and that's a good point, because there's a lot of times you probably are doing what you consider your job, but your client is like, oh my goodness, Lacy, that was amazing.
Fantastic. That's
and
right.
You may never, honestly, you may never have said that to anyone.
Right.
But you're like, oh, well, a client thinks it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's right. It's par and course. And let me tell you, those client testimonials, listen, it's nothing like telling your supervisor, listen, this is what the client wrote. It's one thing for the client to say it, but the client put this in writing. And that's a value. That's where we want to continue to be. That sets a very high threshold.
So Angela, if we have you back, talk a little bit about the value of your value list, and how do you keep it up? What are best practices, that type of thing?
Sure. Yes, and I am back. I'm on a landline, and my camera's working. Thank you. I am, in terms of your value list, and again, in the setting of a private practice, I try to look at this in terms of client goals, personal goals, and team goals. And so, and I know I've spoken with both of you before, and probably some other people on the line. I very much believe in the business plan, an individual business plan at the beginning of the year. And so what Lacy's talking about in her brag book, I get the sort of foundation for that every year is my business plan, because those are the things that I, set out to do in those 3 areas. And so there's always kind of some extra stuff that gets thrown in because people ask me to do things like this, and that's nice. And or my boss asks me to do something, or I get an award, whatever. It's those are all gravy, but you have the basics of that you're kind of already planning for. And in terms of this year, right? What a wild year to have a bunch of business development goals. I think people are really needing to be creative in terms of how to have personal communications. I don't know about y'all, but I'm pretty done with the Zoom happy hour. I'm needing to figure out and be a little bit more creative. What I have found recently with clients and team members is that you don't have to be very creative, right? Everybody recognizes that if you're not in the same room, that it's really not going to be the same experience. But people are hungry. It's been 6 months. People are tired of being at home and being by themselves. They're hungry for a variety of different types of activities. So really add value in your client relationships right now by thinking about what is interesting to me? What do I want to do right now, given the current circumstances? In terms of the team, I think I've kind of already spoken about that, right? I've spoken about how you need to really think about how can I help the people around me. One thing that I think is really important for someone to remember when they're talking with their supervisor is what it looks like from their supervisor's shoes. This is always important, right? Anytime you go into a review, you need to have a mirror and be thinking about how it's being received. But think about right now, right? There is stress at every level of an organization. Pretty much if you are reporting up to someone, they probably have more stress about how to keep the organization running effectively. So every person that you're dealing with is hearing you on stress, but has their own load and it looks different than yours. So anytime you can demonstrate that you understand that and you're respectful of it, and you can take something off of their plate, large or small, it really matters right now. Again, I'm going to go back to I am all about firm loyalty and real loyalty in relationships. And this is a really good opportunity to build a lot of that. And then in terms of practice skills right now and adding value, from a litigator's perspective, I feel like there's actually a lot of opportunities because for younger people, because people are wanting, judges and arbitrators are wanting to get on with it. They're tired of this too. And so we're doing a lot of Zoom hearings, a lot of teleconferences, and everybody wants to talk to people right now. I don't know if it's just my own practice, but they're hungry for it. And so it's great. One of my senior associates got to argue not in one, but 2 different arbitrations this spring, or actually one's in court and one's in arbitration. She has a summary judgment argument tomorrow. So there really is a lot of opportunity, I find right now, for in the litigation space for new voices, because people are, wanting to be heard probably more than in their normal practices. We just want that, we're craving that interaction.
So I see a lot of folks that are in-house, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So you probably are experiencing some of what I am, which is there is a lot of pressure. You've heard a little bit from Lacy's perspective. She's at Deloitte but has clients. Angela's perspective, she's at a law firm. But being in-house, there's a lot of financial pressure right now in a way that I haven't seen before in the time I've been at NTTA, and it just is what it is. So I find that I'm doing a lot of bridge building. So I will make those calls to different ones of my peers. Like if someone expresses something that she's feeling overwhelmed, I pick up the phone and call her. Are you okay? What can I do? How can I help? That type of thing. And I find myself having that role a lot more than perhaps before. Just in terms of, there's a huge difference between kind of a pandemic and a crisis situation versus your normal everyday. You've got your contracts, you're doing your stuff, and it's kind of the norm. Just everyone's stress level, to your point, Angela, is just up. Everybody. And it could be any reason. It could be, they've got kids at home that, that they're now dealing with, or they could have someone on their team that might be sick, including with COVID. And it's just a really stressful time. So I find that I become almost like the counselor piece of our role as lawyers, as opposed to the advocate piece. I find myself doing that a lot more these days, but with success. And I'm, hopefully, bringing a little measure of calm to my team in an otherwise stressful situation. So Lacy, I want, you do benefits. That's your expertise. I want to talk a little bit about that. We heard a little bit from Angela about reviews. Well, tell me a little bit about how do you leverage the review and all those great things you're doing on your value list and your brag book, and how do you leverage it in a COVID world?
Well, I think in a COVID world, you leverage it by first getting comfortable or understanding where your needs are, right? So it's no secret that traditionally women don't negotiate. They don't negotiate for salary. They don't negotiate for benefits. And that's a huge void, and usually a lot of benefit and money left on the table. One of the things that I try to do with my brag book and my business plan, especially if I've knocked it out of the park, is I reevaluate every year, what else is it that I'm looking for? Angela talked about loyalty. I've been at Deloitte 13 years now, so obviously there's a little bit of loyalty there. But as life changes, your needs change. I think about all of my colleagues right now who have children. I don't, but it's a difficult situation. I see them struggling, but I'm also a caregiver to elderly grandparents. And so that's a different struggle. So I try to take what's in my brag book and leverage that to ask for anything additional that I may need. Now, I think what's important to understand in the world of COVID is that there are wants, and we all want a lot of things, but there are basic needs. And in considering that a lot of organizations are lean, a lot of salaries have been reduced or capped for the next year, and some discretionary spend that otherwise would be there is no longer there. I still think that it's okay to evaluate what it is that you need and be able to lean into leveraging that brag book to make some asks. And so sometimes that ask may be, you know what, I need childcare. I am taking on a lot of responsibility for the organization. I'm saving money, and my brag book reflects all of that, right? I am working twice as many hours. Hello, I'm talking to myself. Now that I'm in a work at home situation, and it's really a work with home situation because home is everything now. It's daycare, it's school, it's a cafeteria. And so I'm doing all of this from my kitchen table, and I am on full steam ahead. What is it that I really need that the organization may be able to assist me with? And so I think employee benefits is one of the things that a lot of people just leave on the table. Whether it's childcare, is there an opportunity for an additional couple of hours that is at the company's expense? Or can I negotiate that? Is it, stress relief? I can't tell you how many times have been sitting here wondering, why does a random part of my body ache? And it's because I've been sitting at this same spot, for the last 9-10 hours. And finally I said, you know what, an ergonomical desk at home would be much more efficient for me. There's no signs of us going in anytime soon. Is that something that I can negotiate or ask for? The opportunities are really limitless once you identify what it is that you want. I think the challenge with negotiating in terms of why you're currently in a position is that most people default to additional salary. And that is great. Who does not want an additional bump in their salary? But we know that salaries are challenged right now. What else is there that's available, that's within the repertoire, or that's reasonable for us to be able to leverage? And so maybe your organization has cut discretionary spending for external conferences. You know what? Maybe they cut that $3,000 out, but is there an opportunity for them to pay for your professional dues for an organization, and you bear the brunt of volunteering for an event so that you get a complimentary membership? I really do think it's thinking outside of the box. Are you using your EAP program if your company has one. If your company doesn't, how can
so Lacy, let me pause you. EAP, what does that stand for?
Employee Assistance Program. See, that's the ERISA attorney in me just going on about it. A lot of organizations have very robust employee assistance programs. However, the numbers always support that the majority of the employees don't tap into it. Go to HR, ask for a copy of that employee assistance program and see what benefits are there so that you can tap into those to make your life easier any way you can right now.
And
can I tag on to that a little bit, Dena?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the other thing that that at least I personally have tried to think about right now is that what are the benefits I'm getting out of COVID? I will confess that I am a glass half full kind of person. So tune out if you are not, and this annoys you. But I am. And so what are the benefits I'm getting out of this? Well, one of the benefits that I'm getting out of it for the most part is not putting on makeup every day. I'm getting to wear more comfortable clothes. I get to get my steps in. I get all that stuff in. That's kind of a perk in my world. It really is compared to my old life. I was going to say my normal daily life, but it's been so long, I think it is my normal daily life. And so, one of the things that we've talked about at our firm is, that women sometimes do feel like that's a perk. And so then when we're having all these like internal Zoom conferences, it really irritates me because I'm like, wait a minute, that's my perk. You're taking away my perk. Now I have to actually present for business again when this was what I was getting out of it. And we've had a lot of funny conversations about it, but I'm pretty serious. I mean, that is part of the flip side. Nobody's having to pay me for that. It's a great thing that I'm getting out of this time, and I want that out of this time. And so I've heard of some firms doing like Zoom free Fridays and different things. Obviously, clients are different, but really trying to think about what is right now the positive side of life for you, and making sure that that's not something that the job is interfering with that you could change. Because I was happy to do that. And I am really cognizant also about, that for other members of my team. Now, other people may feel like the opposite, that they really need this time and they would prefer to have a call, or prefer to have a video call, but having a dialogue around that, to Lacy's point, in terms of what do you need and what's okay to ask for, this is certainly okay to talk and ask about in the workforce right now, in terms of what is best for you from working style. My brother sort of calls this 2020 the year that the conference call died, because he's like, what's wrong with the conference call? We did this forever. Now, for some reason, it's not okay. So just thinking about, are there other perks? I didn't love doing all the remote school, but I did love seeing my kids more. And I've heard a lot of people say that, I'm traveling a lot less. I get to see my children more. Sometimes it's stressful more, and I'm doing different things that I maybe would have envisioned. But I think taking stock at the end of the year, as we approach the end of the year and people have performance reviews, and you're thinking about what are the perks and being able to articulate those for yourself, again, from your supervisor's perspective, is really appreciated and shows an emotional maturity. I'm not saying, by the way, I was emotionally mature a month in, but this is drug on. I've tried to put on my glasses half full.
So I love that you mentioned about being video versus not being video. We went both ways a little while at NTTA, where we were no video for the most part, except the boss. And then he said live in a meeting that everyone had to turn their video on. I don't recommend that. I love my boss, don't get me wrong. But then you've got people who are like, makeup, hair, what am I wearing? I have to turn it on. I'm in a t-shirt. So I love that concept of have that discussion about it beforehand, because that is part of today's world. And the silver linings, Angela, we've got Microsoft Teams. So we don't have Zoom, but I love sharing documents. Like when I otherwise would have had my lawyers come into the office so we can be together and have that conversation, I can now do that on Microsoft Teams, where we are together editing a document, having the full brainstorming discussion. It feels as if we're in a conference room, but not, and they don't have to have that extra travel time, which, by the way, we don't pay for. So, it's a win-win really for everyone in terms of what we're doing. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about keeping your job and then moving to another job. And we did talk about, you know, keeping your job through the brag book. Angela, you had mentioned something as we prepared for this about there's less soft time. How do you compensate for that when you've got, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there are days that I'm like booked all day with a Zoom, a webinar, or WebEx, or, you know, all that type of thing. How does someone shine when they may not have your attention as much as, you know, they would have in a hallway discussion where you run into them in the break room or whatever?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm trying to do with my team, and to the extent that you have the ability to do this on your team, is to you know, fill the quiet space. You know, normally when you're dialing in, not everybody is dialing in at the same time or coming on to a video call at the same time, and there's always that time. I am talking a lot less about the weather right now, and more about, I go pretty much directly to, how's your baby? You know, how's that, you know, your backyard garden you started in August, how'd that work out for you? You know, those kind of, you know, obviously you have to have had some conversations or some rapport that you've built with your team over years, or even during COVID, a couple of those calls to understand what's, you know, kind of have your finger on what's going on with them. But keeping it there by really filling all of that soft time. You know, it used to be where during that time I was kind of clearing my email, making sure that if the client wasn't on or the whole team wasn't on, I could, you know, was filling that time really with my own head on kind of getting my stuff done. And I'm really trying to use that time externally right now for other people and seeing what's going on with them. And clients don't mind, by the way, is my experience, because they're wanting to, again, people want interaction. So they're like, you know, tell us about that garden. You know, how is that baby? People are a lot more tolerant of human interaction, you know, while you're waiting right now, I think, than ever before. And nobody wants to talk about the weather. So I would say that, first of all. Second of all, I think from the person who's being, so the supervised person, I think you're going to have to figure out a way to reach out and say, hey, I just, you know, need a couple minutes. I've got a couple things I'm tossing around. We have those conversations in the hall all the time. And it's okay to say, I really need to work through that with you. You know, in the private practice, we call that billable time. Okay, that is called analyzing a problem together. And even if, you know, it's not on my matter and I'm just pitching in to a mentee to kind of brainstorm with them, that's the practice of law. Now, you know, obviously you've got to be sensitive to people's schedules, and they may tell you, yeah, that time in my life is while I'm taking a walk with my dog between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, or 7 or 8 or whatever. Or it's, you know, at 9 o'clock at night when I get my kids to bed, that's the time that I have for that kind of thing. And I'm fine with that. If that's, you know, I'm fine with adjusting on both sides of that, just because, again, everybody's invading people's home life right now. So being willing to reach out and say, I could really use your brain on this is frankly flattering to most people. And it gives you that one-on-one time that, you know, you need, and probably your client needs to kind of creatively solve a problem. And again, all of that would have been happening in the workforce normally. So you just have to be artificial about it and schedule that meeting for it right now.
So I find with my team, we've got something set up every day at 10 a.m. And even though we're now back in the office, we're still doing everything by Teams. There's always, we know every day there's going to be a meeting. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, depends what we got going on. And we always end in a question. So today's question was a funny one. My second in command comes up with them. She's like, what word is it that the pronunciation is different than how it looks? I was like, paradigm. Looks like paradigm, right? So little things like that, but it allows me to get to know my team better. And I got to be honest, I probably know my team much better now than I did before, because we have these daily questions. And when I'm there, I now know that one of my team members likes to garden. I didn't know this before. One of them was really, really happy when she had her son, not because she gave birth, also because she gave birth, but because she was sick and she stopped being sick all the time. I never would have known these things had we not had this fun discussion with the team. And then birthday parties are interesting too, because we used to always go to lunch with everybody, and now we're doing it through Teams. So I've got this list of questions. Who is your hero? If you weren't in your current job, what would you like to do? And it feels more intentional, but it allows me to get to know my teammates a little bit better. So I'm turn to you, Lacy. Lacy, in today's world, should you change jobs?
In today's world, you have to do what you need to do, right? I would love to tell people to stay and stick it out, but the reality of it is that COVID has had some deep and drastic impacts on some lawyers' lives. And so while the market is not as robust as it used to, there are plenty of employers that are still hiring. There are some industries and sectors that have just taken off. And so I am for people making a leap if they need to, but I do have some practical tips in order to be able to do so. So it's really all about readiness. You can't just, if you already have a job and you're taking on additional responsibilities, it may be too much for you. You may need to find something that's a little bit slower pace. And so you may negotiate internally, but if that doesn't happen, you may have to go external to find something else. And so given the current climate, there are a couple of things that you just have to do. You have to be astutely aware of what's going on in the market. It's just unacceptable to just start throwing your resume out there and doing cold calls. You need to understand really what is going on in the market, who's hiring, and what those job opportunities look like in order to best evaluate if you are a fit there. So you've got to do your research. You also have to approach I think the job market a little bit differently in COVID times, because there may not be an opportunity for you to build relationships by meeting. A lot of organizations are doing full hiring process from beginning to end via video conference or some type of video interview. And that takes practice. That is not something that is inherent to most people. Most lawyers are great in person, face-to-face. Over video, doing an interview is a little bit challenging, especially when you're doing video interviews through multiple rounds. And that may look different. You also need to really understand, who the key players are and who has the opportunity for you to leverage your negotiation skills with. And we all know that a good salary, a good package for someone really starts with the first interview. And so I think going into that first interview, once you've identified some people, you really need to understand and ask the questions, what does the full process look like? You can even ask the questions, what options are available? Because the last thing that we want to do right now is waste our time or anybody else's time. If you know from the beginning that the options are not there and you've done your research and know historically that this company is not going to budge, then it may not be a good fit for you. And so once you've kind of done all of those things, you want to talk about and think of, once some offers have been made, where are you in terms of what's acceptable to you? And that's really a challenge for most lawyers. And I think the statistics support particularly that most women leave so much on the table. They don't even try to negotiate for fear of a couple of different things. And so you want to make sure that you're prepared to go in, understanding that there's a laundry list of things that may be available to you, even in this time of COVID and unprecedented times. We have not because we asked not. So there are a couple of rules that I can go over, but I'll pause there to see if Angela would have anything to add.
Angela, what are you seeing in the lateral world?
Well, it's busy right now, and more so for partners and associates. For associates, we're seeing record levels of attrition. I mean, that is what across the market, people are not generally moving. But there are a lot of partner opportunities right now because firms are struggling to figure out, how they're going to navigate this. And one way to navigate that is obviously to buy revenue. So what does this mean from the perspective, of both groups? I think from the associate perspective, making sure that you understand what's going on with the people that give you work is really important right now. If you are slow because they are slow, right, then you need to think about, what does that mean for me long-term here? Because as much as you're valued and respected and you like your job, if the person who gives you most of your work is not there, then that may change the mix for you to be able to stay there. So really kind of, and I know this is hard. When I moved to my prior firm, we had a group of 20 associates and one had any clue that anything was going on. And we were in the same room together, or same offices together, right? So it's really hard to focus on that, but there are little signs. There definitely are in terms of, what's happening with cases, what's happening with clients and so forth. So really keeping your pulse on does my partner plan to stay here? And also listen for what's happening at my firm in terms of how they're treating partners. Because, there are, unfortunately, there's salary cuts right now, there are draws that are really dramatic. And, some of my partners have talked, and I have talked about some other things we've heard in the industry, and we've thought, I don't have the ability to scale down my life to such a degree to take that kind of cut. I just don't. Mortgage, I just can't call them and say I'll pay half. And so, just figuring out kind of what is happening from the perspective of the people that I need my work, to keep on coming from is really important. From the partnership perspective, I think it's also important to understand, what about the people I cross-sell? If I'm a corporate lawyer, I really need the best tax person to do my work or my finance person. And if they can't manage that kind of struggle that the firm is, for whatever is asking them to do, then they might leave. And what does that do to your practice? So staying close to your people, understanding how things are impacting people right now is really important. That said, if you have a practice that is COVID proof or, sort of really, you've retooled, as Lacy has said, I have, somebody at my firm has become the expert on some of these PPE loans, things like that. Like, there's a lot of opportunity to go really deep. Legislative affairs, there's people that are really good, really busy right now and really understand which way the market's going to move. And so those folks have a lot of opportunities. And from the perspective of a leader in a firm, I'm trying to pay very close attention to making those people happy right now, because they need to stay, right? So there's just a lot of stuff going on, and you being savvy as to those things that are happening, not necessarily talking with everybody about them, but observing, and then calibrating, just as Lacy has said, in terms of, how does this affect me? How am I, what can I tolerate if things change here? If Dena and Lacy both leave my firm, does that mean I don't want to work there anymore? And so forth. In terms of, if you do switch, the number one thing I think that would be easy to negotiate for, and I completely agree with what Lacy and Dena said in terms of women asking for things. Women often want to work more from home. I don't know if everybody agrees with that now. I think people might change a little bit on that, but the number one thing people have always said is, I really want more flexibility, so forth. I've always thought you should just get your own flexibility, particularly if you're a partner, because you're a human being, just make your own flexibility. But right now, I think to the extent you can't get flexibility in your job formally, there are more sort of requirements in terms of, being there. I think now is the time to say, going forward, I just want my deal to be where I work from home some percentage of time, even after COVID. I think a lot of people are thinking that's the way it's going anyway, so just ask for it if that's something that you like and want. That, to me, is the number one thing I think that it would be easy to ask for right now. I'm sure there are others, but this is, if you look at the number, like the AmLaw 20, like the difference in firms in terms of what they thought before about working from home and now, it's like upside down. I mean, before, I think they thought in 5 years, lots of people will be working from home. Nobody thought that. Now it's like everybody thinks that. And so it's an easy perk to think about asking for.
Yeah, I want to get to later that we're still working from work. We're here, and I never want my business people to be without me. And not that I don't trust them, but there is a little bit of being present. So even if they're walking to their office, I'm here, so I can hear what's going on. To your point, Angela, it's easy when there's closed door conversations and people are animated as they're speaking. If you're in person to see it, it's a little harder. to kind of suss out what's going on unless you've got a good relationship. For instance, if you're an associate and a partner like Angela, and maybe you find a 10-minute downtime on when Angela's available on a Friday afternoon, be like, hey, so how are things going? And maybe you ask those, softly. You don't want to be like, so Angela, are you making less money? You don't want to do that, of course. But I also want to talk a little bit about in-house. So from my perspective, I have seen a lot of in-house lawyers not have jobs. And that, of course, is stressful, that you think, oh gosh, what is that going to mean? Now, do I think that has a specific impact on my job? No, I don't. I'm happy with my job, happy with my boss, all that type of stuff. They do need a general counsel, so I feel okay there. But it also gives a general sense of anxiety about our profession when I'm seeing so many in the Texas General Counsel Forum are former fill in the blank. And, I see a lot, for instance, in oil and gas, which is being decimated again and in terms of their revenues. So I see probably from a purely in-house perspective, a little bit more of hold on to the job that you have. Now, that doesn't mean, to Lacy's point, there aren't positions out there, because probably every month in COVID world, I've had someone mention a job that would be an intriguing job. And I always think it's an opportunity to think about, what do you think about your current job? Or you're in some ways, by not pursuing another opportunity, you're recommitting to your current job. And so I'm seeing a little bit of that. But Lacy, I am very curious. You said you have tips and tricks. I want to know them. So what are my tips and tricks?
Listen, okay, let's talk about it. So most of the time when we're out doing our job hunt and we're going on interviews, most people are negotiating the salary. You need to really negotiate the job offer. The two are not synonymous. But much of the satisfaction from a job is going to really come from a bunch of other factors that you negotiate. And perhaps the biggest portion of it is salary. But I always tell people, don't get so fixated on the money. Focus on the value of the deal, the responsibilities that you're going to have. Is it going to enhance your career? Is it going to free up your time? Is the location conducive? Going back to having that flexibility. Is there an opportunity for travel and you get the travel perks as a result of it? Are there opportunities for growth? Can you grow into a promotion or into another position that you want? Is there support for continued education and so forth? So I think we have to start thinking about how we negotiate differently. Also, it's very important to negotiate multiple offers simultaneously and not serially. A lot of people go out for their interviews and they don't get the one that they want, and then they wait 2 or 3 weeks and they try for something else. It's really best to, within a certain time frame, do your interviews in a window, so you'll know and be able to compare relatively what is out there in terms of what people are offering you. And you also have the additional leverage. There will come a time, usually at some point in negotiation, you may be asked a question, or you may be able to use another offer as leverage to get the job that you really want. But if you have not had that experience, or if that experience comes much later, you lose out on that leverage. So I always encourage people, if you know you're going to be in the market, then be in the market. Be all in, put your fillers out there, so that you learn through going through iterations of interviews how you can improve for the next one. And so it's best to negotiate when you have a couple of offers to be able to do it simultaneously. Don't negotiate just to negotiate. Sometimes we are just throwing things out there that it doesn't matter. You really have to figure out what is important to you, because negotiating just to negotiate can really rub people the wrong way. And then you lose the credibility of being likable. And we all know that most of the time we get the job because of our network and us having a likability factor. Sometimes the skill set is even, third or secondary to it. So don't negotiate just to negotiate, and really think through the timing of your offers. I can't tell you how many times people have given me a call and said, hey, they want to know, they gave me an offer today, they want the response back tomorrow or within 48 hours. I think it's okay to say, you know what, I need more time, and give them that time frame. If a week is what you need, then based on doing your research and knowing what the market is requiring for this particular position, I think you can say that, but you need to articulate that early, because it's a balancing act. You don't want to pull back too much. You don't want to push too hard, but you do want to give yourself an earnest opportunity to really evaluate your offers. Also, too, it's important to don't ever give any ultimatums. I can't tell you how many times people have been negotiating. It was, well, if I don't get $5,000 for my continuing education, then this offer is just not for me. Then I'm sorry, you're not a fit for us. I may not have been willing to give $5,000 for continuing education, but I would have given you a $3,000 sign-on bonus for you to do whatever you wanted to. But because you gave me an ultimatum and really rubbed me the wrong way, then that's not an option anymore. I also think it's important to really maintain a sense of perspective and stay at the table, right? You can be the best negotiation pro and still lose out on something that you really want. And so you have to have that perspective of where things are as a priority for you, and where things are, okay, I would have liked to have, but it's not a deal breaker. And it's okay to stay at the table and pound a little bit harder. Or I always tell people, part of staying at the table is, I may not have gotten it now, but maybe it's an opportunity for me to go back and ask for 6 months later. Maybe the tides have turned. Maybe there's some additional opportunity there. And really for women, it's important to think about everything that is available, whether it's additional vacation days, flexible hours, signing bonuses, match in your plan. Maybe there's a non-qualified plan that you can participate in. We've talked about working from home. If you're at a company, is some type of equity or stock options or some other type of equity available? Are relocation expenses on the table if your potential employer wants you to be in a certain location and you can't do it virtually? We've talked about ongoing professional and personal development. Maybe it's a better job title that you want to negotiate that more reflects your experience and your responsibilities. Maybe it's childcare expenses, certain expenses being reimbursed. Hello, ergonomical work from home situation. Give me all of that. Maybe it's project placement. Maybe you want to have the opportunity to work with a certain business unit, or you want to have an opportunity to work on a certain client of the firm. I think it's okay to ask for all of that. Negotiate your promotions. We talked about your job title. It's really car allowances. It's really limitless to what you can negotiate for. We just don't go into negotiations really having the full assessment of what it is that we're looking for and understanding where our pain points are.
So Angela, you've served as hiring partner. You kind of heard Lacy talk a little bit about the things that you can negotiate, and it wasn't just salary, it wasn't just bonus. How would you have received that type of negotiation if that you were trying to bring someone on at your firm?
Yeah, that's much more unusual in a law firm. I mean, we have a pretty standard set of stuff that we will, particularly for junior associates. Look, for senior associates, I think one-time bonuses are a good thing to ask for, whether it's, to start, to stay, there's different, one time is one time, and we are definitely in a one-time kind of world right now. Okay. So that for sure. I think people also who are moving, bar, there's always the negotiation of the bar expenses, the time you're studying for the bar, all of that. I think people often don't think about, they really don't think about how much time they need. My favorite story on this is when I was working for a judge for a year after I graduated from law school. I would waive into the bar for a year. If you took the state bar in Kansas where I clerked that year, you had to take it within a year of taking another bar. And so I was like, oh, I've already taken the bar once, I'll try. And my judge came in to me the week after and she said, when were you going to ask for the time off? Because you know you'd be embarrassed if you failed this bar. And I said, never. And she said, I know, but like, you need to. Of course you need to do that. You don't want to start your first job with having just, you know, failed a bar. It doesn't matter. You have to ask, you have to answer that on your, you know, on all questionnaires going forward. So you don't want to do that. But I didn't want to ask. So I totally get it. And people trip themselves up when they move. I think a lot of people are going to be moving right now. That was actually the thing I was going to tag on to Lacy right now, to what Lacy said. I think knowing whether, particularly in-house, whether you are open to moving is a really important kind of gateway issue when you are looking at your job search. Because don't forget your colleagues and contacts at outside law firms. We get a ton of information about jobs that are opening up. Many of those are not necessarily in Dallas or even in Texas. So, you know, if you can connect with me and tell me, hey, I'm willing to move for that position, I'm willing to move, that is huge information for me, and I can really, you know, potentially help you. But if you haven't really sorted that out mentally yet in terms of, you know, yes, I would move, which cities, what things are important to me, you're not, you know, you're not really in the game. You're not really ready.
So we are nearing the end of our time. You guys are amazing. I am going to post in the chat box our CLE course number. Let me say it out loud for those who may not have chat box open. It's 174097924. I'll read again, 174097924. If there's any issues, talk to Maria, who's the executive director of the Dallas Women Lawyers Association. So in our last 2 minutes, do you have words of wisdom?
Go, Lacy.
My words of wisdom are, you are going to always be your best advocate. You know, we ask not because we have not. I think it's very important, particularly as women, that we take command of our career. You know whether you're happy or not. You've done the research to know if this is a place for you to stay post-COVID. If your industry or organization is going to be able to weather the storm, you are in key positions. And so you have access to all of the information that you need to make that decision. And if you need to make a move, I think it's prudent for you to do all the diligence and research and be smart about making the move. Leverage your network, leverage all the tools that are out there, and best wishes.
Last words for me are to, you know, always remember your audience. And when you're talking about reviews and decisions about moving or even exploring moving right now, just remember who you're talking to and the kinds of stresses and issues that are going on with them. Stop, look, and listen as to what's going on around you. It's so much harder right now. On the other hand, since this is Dallas Women's Lawyers Association, I will say, I think, you know, women are really good at relationships stereotypically. And so, you know, we're good phone talkers, as my mom used to say. And so we really have an opportunity to lean on those skills and remember that we're good at relationships. And right now, when you need to be cementing those, lean on those great relationship skills that you have used your entire career to get yourself to the next spot.
Thank you so much. I would ask for a round of applause, but I'm going to give you a round of applause. You guys are amazing. These are extraordinary lawyers. For the attendees, if you haven't met them in a post-COVID world, go meet them. They're awesome, fantastic mentors, all that. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Dena, thank you for leading us. Great to see both of you. Bye, you all.